So, my name is Melody, as we've established. If you were here yesterday, not yesterday, I don't know what was happening here yesterday. Last month, Greg started off his talk with how many schools he went to. Now, he has me beat by a few, but I was in more countries, so, boom. It's not a competition, though. So, basically, 9 schools, 4 different countries before age 18. Dropped out of high school. I know that may be shocking to some of you that know me and didn't know that fact. Studied journalism, became a section editor at a local daily, and then in 2008, paper folded, as a lot of them were doing at the time. So I got kicked around a bit before finding my spot again here in Sacramento. But before we get to that, I want to talk about why I love storytelling. I studied journalism, but really journalism, design, all that we do as creatives, storytelling. And that's what I really love. I love finding the stories behind items and the people that make things happen. So I got into storytelling when I was very young, and I read Harriet the Spy. Who's read that book? Yay! If you haven't read it, find an 11-year-old and read it to them. Or you can read it out. It's about a girl from New York who wants to be a writer, and so in order to practice writing, she walks the same route every day from school, and she records what she sees. People doing things, her friends, her family. And after reading this book, I won't give you any spoilers, it's a great book, go read. But after reading this book, I started doing that, and I started writing, and I think I was 8. And I just started writing, and I wrote every day until college, and then I had to write for work and stop writing for fun. But you should still write for fun, even if you have to do it for work. So that's what got me into journalism. Now, journalism has been a tough gig, as a lot of you probably know, but this is a wonderful quote from the book. Life is a struggle, and a good spy goes in there and fights. So I kept doing it. I kept looking for stories. When the paper folded in 2008, I moved to Sacramento to seek my fame and fortune in the big city. I freelanced for Midtown Monthly. I worked for the Woodland Daily Democrat. I worked for the Auburn Journal. I dove into lifestyle blogging, where I met a bunch of my really awesome friends. Some of them are here today. I went to every meetup and mixer I could for 2 reasons. 1, for the connections, like you guys are all here doing, and 2, for the free food, because when you're trying to piecemeal stuff together, the free food makes a big difference. I needed to find my footing, and after a few years and many failed ventures, I found my way to Capitol Public Radio. And that is where I was able to really continue to chase my curiosities where they led me. And they led me to a bunch of stuff on the side of the road. Driving around, and then ever since I moved to Sacramento, I had questions about these things that I saw. Why is there a castle in Roseville? It's weird. There's like coats on the lawn. I would come home from, or I'd like drive to the Bay Area, come back, and every time I'd look, I'm like, what is a milk farm? Don't you call them dairies? Like, what? And there's nothing underneath that sign. It's just this big, beautiful sign with nothing underneath it. So I started looking into these things. I started asking questions and making phone calls, and you can read all of the stories that I've written, and some written by other of my colleagues. Some written by my colleagues at capradio.org/roadside distractions. But I'm going to talk a little bit about some of my favorite stories and some of my favorite mysteries that I've uncovered, Nancy Drew style. Okay, we're back. How does this work? Don't look. Everybody look away. All right. You can look back now. So this, as we were mentioning, the castle. What's up with that? It's freaky. My favorite thing about the castle story is, in lieu of facts readily available to you, the public, people just make stuff up. So when I started researching this, I started finding all sorts of interesting things about this castle. Like, it was built by the Shah of Iran. That the residents would put on elaborate Shakespearean plays starring dogs. The Zillow listing says that there are panic rooms and secret tunnels, which, I mean, that could actually be true. They denied it when I talked to them, but who knows? Also, it's a themed restaurant. I talked to a guy that grew up there, and he said his mom would have people come to the door asking for reservations. None of those things are true. I mean, except for maybe the panic room and the secret tunnels. But here are some things that are true. There is a moat.
There is a helipad, and the gentleman that built it did have a helicopter once upon a time, and he told me, I was not able to confirm this with the city of Roseville, but he told me that the city of Roseville intentionally passed a ordinance to outlaw him from parking his helicopter overnight on his helipad. Called the city of Roseville, they say that it had nothing to do with him, it's just a normal city ordinance that every city has. There is a real, honest-to-goodness English throne with a hole cut in it, set over the toilet. And for a long time, there was a crown that would sit on top of it that was lit up, but his wife threw it away. So the guy I'm talking about, is Jerry Lee. He's 80 now. He still works full-time and races cars for fun. He used to own a chain of beauty schools that went belly up. He's a really interesting guy. You can find out all about him in the story that I wrote. But my point is that when the mystery is not, when there is a mystery, we make up theories and then we just go with it and somebody repeats it. And so a lot of these stories that I did, I was debunking things that became lore. So sorry for messing up your lore. The other thing is, this one, I really liked. It was the drive-in movie theater. How many of you have driven by the drive-in with a big group of people and in the car, and somebody's like, "Oh, they're shutting that down"? Has everybody had that experience, right? That was the way it was for the entire time I lived in Sacramento, and I'm like, when? If they're shutting it down, why isn't it happening? There was even a big sign that said, "Retail coming soon." Like, when soon? So I got a hold. I went and found the plans for the retail development, and I found a number on the plans, and I called the number, and I got in touch with the president of the corporation, the parent company that owns the theaters. And he was like, "Oh yeah, we were totally gonna tear that down. 2008, we were locked and loaded, ready to go. The economy tanked, and big retail spaces didn't make as much sense." One more thing happened in 2008, which a lot of you probably don't know. Attendance to drive-in theaters spiked. Everywhere, people started going to drive-in theater, not just here, but everywhere. So two things happened. Big retail didn't make as much sense. Drive-in started becoming more popular. And so I was like, wow, that's super interesting. And I'm like, well, the sign's still up, you still have the plans? He's like, yeah, as soon as it makes financial sense, I'm tearing those things down. And I was like, oh, okay. So that was enlightening. And so, I'm talking to him, and he gets me in touch with, he's like, well, you should talk to our marketing person, because, that's what they have to say. So I get in touch with the marketing person, and he assures me that they're not going anywhere, that the drive-ins are staying for a long, long time, and everybody can be, and I was like, oh, okay. So my point is that you have to dig. You can't just rely on your marketing person or your average person that the obvious choice for the story. You have to ask more people. You have to dig and talk to more people, because the story might actually be different depending on who you talk to and depending on who's in charge. Rebecca mentioned one of my all-time favorite, most popular roadside distractions is the Ocean City, Maryland sign. I'm sure you guys are all wondering why we have a sign for Ocean City, Maryland in Sacramento, California. It's such a quandary, such a mystery that it was even featured in a local comic book written by Evan Burgoon. And here's the panel illustrated by Michael Calero. This story, basically, I had, once again, lots of people like, oh, it's a sister city, or, oh, it's this or that, lots of fun theories. The truth is, Highway 50 begins there and ends in Ocean City, Maryland. Or ends there and begins in Ocean City, it just depends on where you're starting. And the reason that I love this story is everybody's brain was tickled by this. Not enough to do anything about it, but enough to not stop because you're on the freeway, but enough to be like, what's going on with that? And it was one of the most popular stories that I've ever written. And it was just, a huge success for people just really wanted to know the story. So my other favorite thing, I'm just gonna say that a lot. My favorite thing is the gentleman that decided we needed an Ocean City, Maryland sign is an elderly man by the name of John Cropper. He's a retired Caltrans engineer. He was in charge of maintenance at the time when he was over in Ocean City, and they have a Sacramento sign. I don't know if you knew that, but on the other side, there's a sign that's for Sacramento. And he saw their sign, and he said, we should have a sign. So he came back here, He called up his buddies in the sign-making department at Caltrans, and he got it done. Now, here's the hilarious part. As the maintenance manager of Caltrans, he was on a crusade to get rid of unnecessary road signs. He was up and down the state, like bookmarking signs, like this needs to go, this isn't necessary, because they're very expensive to maintain. Who knew? I didn't know that. To add to the irony of it all, this sign has been stolen twice. So he's had to replace it. So I solved that mystery-ish. But why is any of this important? You could argue that it's probably not. A mystery is something hidden, something not entirely obvious. And curiosity is what drives us to uncover the unknown. Everyone wondered about that damn Ocean City, Maryland sign, and the answers to why it was there was not entirely, like you could Google it, but it took some digging. It wasn't super obvious. So my curiosity led me to investigate, to track down the man responsible and ask him, why? And that brings me to my next point, that as creatives, we are always looking for that lightning bolt of inspiration, the apple on the head moment. That's hard. It is hard to make that happen. But curiosity is everywhere. You can just look around and be like, what's up with that? And from that, you can really cultivate some very interesting things, whether it's a design, a painting, a talk, a comic book, whatever it is. Elizabeth Gilbert has this quote: "Passion is a tower of flame, but curiosity is a tiny tap on the shoulder." When you're driving down the road, you're like, what is that sign about? A little whisper in the ear that says, that's kind of interesting. So I want to encourage you to not discount that tap on the shoulder. When you feel it, stop and think, is there something there? Is that something I can use for my next project? Is that a story that I can tell that 100,000 people are also interested in because they're all getting that tap on their shoulder when they drive by this sign? Don't discount the what the F moment. If you're feeling it, I'm sure other people are also thinking, what the F? And answer that question. So also, don't worry about passion. A lot of people are like, oh, follow your passion. That's great if you have one. If you have one, great, follow it. If you don't, follow curiosity, because that can lead to really great things like passion. I want to encourage all of you, as you walk into the world filled with crazy mysteries and weird things, to take some time to wonder and ask why, collect information, explore, look around and collect ephemera, make notes, do sketches, and then take it one step further. Find that person, not the obvious person, the second person or the third person. Get their stories. What questions are still unanswered? And that is how we will find mystery in the everyday. Thank you. That's all. Wait. Hang on. Yeah.
We're just going to open it up to questions. Anyone have any mysterious questions to ask Melody?
When you were writing stories, how do you build up to that mystery? How do you sort of bury the lead?
Oh, as a journalist, we try not to bury the lead, actually. I know that I write my stories in the inverted pyramid, all the most important stuff at the top, and then we go down because I know most of you will never get to the end. So I usually start my story with, hey, you guys are all wondering about this. I'm assuming, because I've been wondering about it. And then, did you know? And then I kind of bring, if you want to know all the ins and outs about Jerry Lee, you have to read all the way to the bottom. But I kind of put the important stuff up at the top, like the important stuff. There's a throne with a hole cut in it. I write very important stories, you guys. Yeah.
How often do you pursue stories that trigger your own curiosity versus something that someone else has shared?
I try, it depends on the job, right? Like when you're working a job, you have to do daily work, and you have to, sometimes it maybe isn't triggering your curiosity, but you need something. I had a journalism professor, and she was telling us that editors will always choose the worst stories for you as the reporter. She talked about one time her editor was like, hey, Marcy, you ever noticed how people wear white button-up shirts? Do a story on that. So I often try to avoid getting to the point where I would have to be given a white button-up shirt story and have a nice backlog of stories that do perk my interest, and just keep that notebook of okay, so that way when I need to do something, I go, oh, what's better than white button-up shirts? That weird self-cannibalizing hot dog on top of that building in Alhambra. So it's a balancing act. It's also a roadside distraction if you're curious. Oh, gosh. Yes.
How's your lifestyle vlogging? So I'm assuming that's the medium. How is that different than the stories that you create for your journalism?
Oh, no, my medium is actually just journalism. My lifestyle blogging was at, I think you can find it at melodystonemedia.com, possibly. It was a long time ago, and I did fashion blogging, and it was really silly, honestly. I did a project where I had I found out I had over 40 dresses, which is excessive. So I took a picture of myself in each dress every day, and then I put it up and had people vote on whether I should keep it, donate it, or burn it. What's hilarious is some people, my old editor from 2 newspapers ago, this dude who's I didn't think he cared about dresses, but he got super into the project. Had little discussions oh, that dress needs to go. I'm oh, okay. So yeah. It was a long time ago. You try to find your spot. Yeah.
Through your research and for your stories, what's one of the more bizarre sources you've come across?
Oh, thank you for asking that question. I didn't get to talk about the story, but there is a paddleboat. It's 3 stories. It was beached. It's technically probably not beached now because of the river levels, but it's this huge paddleboat. It was actually in a John Wayne movie. He used to own it. It was in Blood Alley. Anyway, it's a crazy story. So I get in touch with the guy who's in charge of the abandoned vessels for California. And he's this old maritime lawyer. And anytime you get to talk to a maritime lawyer, do it. But this guy was so fascinating. He was telling me, basically he had to sue the owner of the boat because the boat was half sunk and tied up, but not very well. And all the people downstream were hey, if this boat undoes itself, it comes down, it'll ruin all of our boats. So he had to sue the owner of the boat, and then, the story is crazy. So the owner of the boat unsinks it, parks it. When I found the boat, it was beached, really far beached, on grass, covered in dragonflies. It was really beautiful. And I finally tracked down, it took me forever, but I finally tracked down the owner of the boat. And he's telling me the whole story about how he got the boat and how it burnt down, and then it was vandalized, and then it sunk, and da-da-da-da-da. And he's yeah, so now it's just floating there. I don't know what to do with it. And I was oh, I don't know how to tell you this, buddy. Floating's not the word I would use for this boat right now. And he's what? How did they get it on land? I'm I don't know. I never got it. That's a mystery. I never got in touch with the people that own the marina. So I have no idea how they got it on land. And I just saw a picture of it in the Stack B this weekend, and it was in water. So that's the whole mystery. But the maritime lawyer, he was hilarious. He was so interesting. He actually litigated a sunken treasure case all the way to the Supreme Court. It was a treasure ship that sunk off the coast of Crescent City. And this is the stuff that I was this doesn't fit into my story at all, but I love it. How do I shoehorn this in? I didn't. But yeah, the treasure ship sunk off the coast of Crescent City. Treasure hunters found it, got it up, and the state was oh no, that's ours. And he was the maritime lawyer that was defending the state, so he's the bad guy. I mean, I'm editorializing, but it's okay. Yeah, and he got it all the way up to the Supreme Court, and then they settled out of court for an undisclosed amount. Right? So that's a great story. But yeah, you come across these amazing people, and he was just so fascinating and super helpful, except toward the end, he's the boat's not in the water anymore, so it's not my jurisdiction. And I'm okay. I kept calling him, and he's technically not my problem. I'm I know it's not your problem. Any more questions? Yeah.
Has curiosity, you've been curious about something and then as you find out about it, you're like, this is boring?
Yeah, that happens. But then what you do is you flip it because, okay, the actual answer is boring, but sometimes you do have to like ruin the lore. Sorry guys, I'm a journalist, I'm not a fanciful sci-fi storyteller. I have to ruin the lore. Like, hey, everybody believes this. It's not true. It's just the sister city of another, you know. It's not the sister city, it's just the end of Highway 50. Like, that might be kind of boring compared to maybe some of the other theories that people had. But the other thing that I found is that people are inherently fascinating. So even if the cut and dry answer is kind of boring, the people behind it are almost always, I have yet to meet a person that is truly boring. And if I do, I think that would be fascinating, and I'd write a story about this boring person. Like, how did you get so boring?
On that note, you're picking stories that most people wouldn't tell.
Yeah.
And you're selecting individuals that probably never expected their story to be shared.
Mm-hmm.
What's the reaction that you get from those that you interview and the mysteries that you do solve?
Oh, thank you. That's a fun question, too. Jerry Lee, he was so funny. When I finally got him on the phone, I was like, there is nothing about your house. Like, you can't find, there are no articles written. He's like, there's lots of articles written about my house. I'm like, when was the last article written? He's like, 1985. I'm like, okay, well, there's this thing, it's called the internet, and there's nothing on that. And he was so funny because he didn't want his story to be told. He was like, well, fine, but I'm not gonna tell you anything. And then he ended up telling me his whole life story. And same thing with John Cropper. He was so excited to tell me his story about the Ocean City, Maryland sign, and also all his stories about the war and flying planes and growing up in Ocean City, Maryland. Like, he had tons of stories, and he was really, really excited to tell his story. And yeah, that old maritime. I found old dudes really love talking to me. Love it. Yeah, so I think a lot of times people are really surprised, or they knew that maybe like with the self-cannibalizing hot dog on top of the nondescript building in off Alhambra Boulevard, they would get people knocking on the door being like, hey, is Capitol Dog here? Like, why is there a hot dog on your roof? So they knew that people were curious. So a lot of times, yeah, the sources that I come across know that there's some curiosity about it, and are usually really happy to talk unless they're, I don't know. Usually they're happy to talk, even if they do protest at first and say, I'm not telling you anything. Yeah.
So can you talk a little bit about how to balance the work that you have to do with your desire to follow the interesting lead?
Oh, I do it. I'm terrible at it. I don't balance it at all. Somebody will be on my Facebook and be like, hey, what's up with that weird boarded up bar off Southside Park? And I'll spend the whole day just researching that and pulling old articles off the SAG-B and reading obituaries, and it goes nowhere. So I'm terrible at it, I'm sorry. I mean, I always get my work done. Like, I always meet deadline. I'm a firm believer in deadlines, and I do always meet them. But sometimes I do let my curiosity just run away with me, and I think that that's fine. I'm giving myself a pass for that. Also, my boss isn't here, so. Yeah.
What countries?
Mongolia, Barbados, Malta, and America. The United States, specifically. I think that's it. All right. Definitely.